Friend, let me ask you something real honest. Have you ever felt like the more you reach out, the further she pulls away? Like you're texting into a void, chasing someone who doesn't seem to notice you anymore? Well, I've got some news that might surprise you. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to stop chasing and go silent. And let me tell you why. Because silence is not weakness. It's a strategy. It's the reset button your confidence has been waiting for. Stick with me, because by the end of this message, you'll understand not just what she does when you stop contacting her, but who you become when you take back your power. Bow. 1. The power of silence. When you stop reaching out, you're not just cutting communication, you're sending a message. A message that says, I know my worth. You stop being background noise and start becoming a mystery. And my friend, people chase what they can't predict too. The emotional roller coaster, at first, she might feel relief. She might think, finally, he's gone. But just give it time. The mind is a funny thing. What was once expected becomes missed. Your name pops into her head when a song plays, a scent passes by, or a memory kicks in. Confusion sets in, then curiosity, then the big question, why isn't he chasing me anymore? 3. The reversal of control. When you were constantly contacting her, you gave her control. She knew you'd be there. But the moment you go silent, you flip the script. Now she has to wonder. Now she has to think. Now she's the one analyzing text and overthinking responses. 4. Testing your value. You see, absence isn't just about missing someone. It's about measuring value. When you remove yourself, she begins to evaluate. Was your presence uplifting or draining? Did you bring peace or pressure? If you were valuable, your silence will echo louder than your words ever did. 5. Curiosity turns into action. If she's genuinely interested, silence will drive her to act. She might reach out, send a meme like an old post, or even just check your status. Why? Because silence is a mirror, and what she sees in that mirror, that's the truth of how she really feels about you. 6. The truth revealed, but here's the real gem. Your silence won't just show you what she does, it'll reveal her true character. If she moves on without a second thought, you have your answer. But if she returns curious, reflective, or even remorseful, then you've uncovered something deeper. So what should you do when you feel ignored, rejected, or taken for granted? You don't beg. You don't chase, you grow. Because the right person won't let silence last forever. And remember, your worth isn't found in someone's replies. It's found in your reflection when you stand tall, speak less, and live better. Silence isn't the end. It's the beginning of knowing your true value. When you stop contacting her, something powerful begins to unfold. And it's not what you might expect. See, most people think silence is weak, that it's passive, that you've given up. But the truth is, silence is one of the loudest messages you can ever send. When you go quiet, you create a space, and in that space, she has to start listening, not just to your voice, but to the echo of your absence. And that echo can be deafening. You used to call, you used to text, you reached out in the morning, sent that goodnight message, followed up after being left on read. You were always available, always present, always making sure she knew you cared. But the moment you stop doing all that, the energy shifts. That silence becomes a statement. And whether she admits it or not, she notices. At first, she might shrug it off. She might assume you're busy or distracted. Maybe she thinks you're playing a little game. But as time goes on, the questions start creeping in. Why hasn't he called? Is he upset? Did something happen? Or even more dangerous for her, is he losing interest? Silence triggers curiosity. And curiosity is powerful because it stirs the imagination. People will start creating their own stories when there's no clear explanation. She'll fill in the gaps with thoughts that reveal her own emotions. Maybe she starts checking your social media. Maybe she lingers longer on your profile than she used to. Maybe she's watching your stories, looking for clues, reading between the lines of your silence. And here's the thing, it's not about playing games. It's about recognizing that always being the first to reach out can actually work against you. It creates an imbalance where your presence becomes expected, and expectation breeds complacency. When you pull back, you break the routine. You stop feeding the rhythm that made her feel in control. She doesn't know what's going on anymore. And that's when she starts to realize your value, not in your words, but in your absence. That's when she understands how much of her day was filled with your energy, how much she relied on your attention to feel validated. Suddenly, she has to ask herself questions she didn't have to ask before. She has to face her own feelings without the distraction of your pursuit. Silence is clarity. It creates room for both of you to see the situation for what it really is. You begin to see whether she genuinely cares or if she just enjoyed the attention. And she begins to feel the weight of your absence, perhaps for the first time, because while words can be ignored and text can be dismissed, silence gets under the skin. It lingers. It whispers truths that noise tries to drown out. When you stop contacting her, the emotional journey she goes through is an instant, but it is real, and it unfolds in stages that hit harder than she expects. At first, there's a sense of relief. Yes, you read that right. Relief. She might feel like she has space to breathe again. Maybe she was overwhelmed. Maybe she took your presence for granted. Maybe she even thought you'd always be around no matter how little she reciprocated. In those early moments of silence, she convinces herself that everything's fine, that your absence is no big deal. But that's just the first stage, because emotions are like waves. They come in sets. And right behind that first wave of relief is a surge of curiosity that creeps in unexpectedly. She starts to notice little things. You're not viewing her stories like you used to, not reacting to her posts, not sending those, just checking on you messages. She realizes the good morning text didn't come, and the silence begins to stretch longer than she expected. That's when the confusion sets in. She starts wondering if something is wrong, if maybe she pushed too far or stayed too silent for too long. This stage is subtle. She won't show it. She might even pretend not to care, but the wheels are turning in her mind, and your absence has taken up more mental space than your presence ever did. As the silence continues, confusion turns to frustration. She's not sure if she's being ignored, forgotten, or replaced. That emotional balance she once controlled so effortlessly is slipping from her hands. She might start scrolling through old conversations, looking for clues. She may revisit your last message, trying to figure out if you were hinting at something. Suddenly, the calm she felt starts to unravel. Now, she's not just missing your contact, she's questioning herself. Did she mess up? Did she overlook something valuable? The longer the silence lasts, the more emotionally tangled she becomes. And here's what's truly powerful. By doing nothing, you're making her feel everything. You're not reaching out, yet you're triggering emotional waves that hit deeper than your messages ever did. You've gone from being a predictable part of her day to an unsettling mystery, and mysteries are hard to ignore. If she has genuine feelings, that emotional roller coaster doesn't stop there. It climbs into a new stage realization. Realization that your attention wasn't just convenient, it was comforting. That your effort wasn't clingy, it was consistent. That your silence isn't punishment, it's a mirror reflecting her own lack of effort. Now she's left with emotions she didn't prepare for. Regret, longing, and maybe even guilt. Not because you're gone, but because she assumed you never would be. She begins to understand the emotional cost of your absence, and she may even find herself wanting to reach out, but not knowing how. The silence you gave her has now become her storm, and the emotional roller coaster is moving faster than she expected. When you were the one always reaching out, calling, texting, checking in, making plans, you handed her the steering wheel without even realizing it. You gave her the power to decide when and if to respond, how to engage, and how much effort to invest. Whether she meant to or not, she started to feel that she was in control of the dynamic. And when someone knows they have control, they tend to get comfortable. Comfortable enough to stop trying. Comfortable enough to ignore your effort. Comfortable enough to take you for granted, thinking you'll always be there no matter how they show up. But the moment you stop contacting her, the script flips. The silence is a signal, and now the roles have reversed. Now she's the one wondering what's going on. She's the one checking her phone, asking herself why your name hasn't popped up today. She might not show it. She might pretend everything's normal. But inside, there's a subtle shift because the rhythm she once relied on, you consistently reaching out, has been disrupted. You've stopped feeding the pattern, and now she has to ask herself a question she never needed to ask before. Why hasn't he messaged me? That question holds power because it means her mind is no longer at ease. And once the comfort is gone, awareness takes its place. Without realizing it, she begins to analyze your silence. Is he upset? Has he moved on? Did he lose interest? And even if she didn't appreciate your messages before, now she misses the consistency because predictability is addictive. People don't always want what's exciting. Sometimes they want what feels safe. You used to be that safety net, but now you've taken it away. And that act alone forces her to face the reality of how much she depended on your attention without giving it the same weight in return. This reversal of control doesn't require manipulation or mind games. It's not about punishing anyone. It's about balance. When you stop doing all the chasing, you allow the relationship or potential relationship to reset. Now the focus shifts from your pursuit to her response. Will she step forward? Will she fill the silence? Or will she remain distant and disconnected? Either way, your silence places the responsibility in her hands. And that's something she's not used to holding. And let's be clear, this isn't just about making her miss you. It's about you reclaiming your sense of value. When you stop giving someone the control to dictate the connection, you regain control over your own emotions, your own time, and your own peace of mind. That shift is powerful. It commands respect, even if it starts with confusion. Because deep down, people recognize when the energy has changed. They feel when the pull they once had is no longer working. And in that moment, they begin to realize that they're not the only one who gets to decide how the story unfolds. When you stop contacting her, whether you realize it or not, you initiate a silent test. Not a test of her loyalty or even her affection, but a test of your value in her life. You see, as long as you're showing up every day, sending that text, checking in, making plans, being available, it becomes incredibly easy for someone to underestimate your worth. It's human nature to overlook what's consistent, to take for granted what's always there. But the moment you pull away, that's when the truth begins to surface. Because it's not in your presence that your value is measured, it's in your absence. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to announce that you're pulling back. You don't even need to do it with attitude or resentment. Just stop. And that silence will start to ask questions she wasn't prepared for. Questions like, was he really important to me? Why do I feel this shift so strongly? Or why does it feel like something is missing? Those aren't just casual thoughts. Those are thoughts that test what role you actually played in her life. If you were merely convenient, someone to talk to when she was bored or lonely, someone who filled time but not her heart, then your silence won't cause much more than a shrug. She'll move on quickly. But if you brought peace, laughter, support, or even just a consistent energy that brightened her day, then your silence will feel like a door closing, a quiet but powerful void that begins to demand her attention in ways words never could. And here's the key. This test of value doesn't just reveal who she is. It reveals who you are. Because while you're silent, you're not sitting in the dark waiting. You're observing. You're watching to see whether she notices your absence, whether she values your energy, whether she even thinks to ask where you went. And more importantly, you're beginning to understand how much you gave and how little you may have received in return. Sometimes we pour ourselves into people, hoping they'll see how much we care, how loyal we are, how real our intentions are. But when that effort is met with indifference or inconsistency, it's easy to get stuck in a cycle of overgiving. By stepping back, you remove your contribution from the equation, and suddenly the balance becomes clear. Does she miss you or just the attention? Does she appreciate your presence or did she just expect it? That's the real test. And that test doesn't need to be graded by words. It gets graded by behavior. When you stop contacting her, you create the space for her to show you what your presence actually meant. Not based on what she says, but on what she does. That's where your value is proven, not in how hard you chase, but in how clearly she feels your absence when you stop. At first, when you stop contacting her, there's silence on both ends. She doesn't message you, and you don't message her. It may seem like nothing is happening, but beneath the surface, something very real is stirring. Curiosity. At first, it's subtle. It might show up as her wondering why you haven't texted her today. She might glance at her phone a few extra times, not because she's waiting, at least not consciously, but because her mind is now seeking a pattern that's been broken. People notice when the expected doesn't show up. You were expected. Your message, your call, your comment, even just your good morning or emoji reply, it was all part of a rhythm she had grown used to. Now that rhythm is gone and curiosity is growing in the silence. As the days pass, that curiosity becomes louder. It starts asking questions she wasn't prepared to answer. Is he done with me? Did I do something wrong? Is he moving on? The longer you stay silent, the stronger those questions become. And even if she acts unbothered, posting like everything's fine, smiling in stories, keeping up her usual social routine, it doesn't mean she's not wondering, because curiosity doesn't need a reason to exist. It grows naturally when something changes without explanation. Then comes the tipping point, the shift from thought to action. If there's even the slightest emotional connection, she will reach a point where wondering isn't enough anymore. She needs answers. That's when the little things start to happen. Maybe she watches your story after ignoring them for weeks. Maybe she accidentally likes an old post or reacts to something small just to get your attention. Maybe she sends a random message, a meme, a question, a simple hey, just to see how you'll respond. That's curiosity breaking the surface. She doesn't want to appear too invested, but the silence is too loud to ignore, and action becomes her way of regaining control. She might even test the waters indirectly. Ask mutual friends about you. Post something she knows you'll see. Bring up an inside joke. These aren't coincidences. They're calculated steps driven by the need to know if you're still paying attention, if you still care, if the door is still open. What was once her passive confidence has now turned into active pursuit because your silence triggered something her comfort never expected. And the beauty of it is that you didn't chase, you didn't beg, you didn't force her hand. You simply stepped back, and that created the space for her to step forward. Not because she had to, but because curiosity demanded it. People always want to understand what they can't predict. And when you stop giving away your attention freely, you become unpredictable. You become the unknown. And in the human heart, the unknown is irresistible, especially when feelings were involved. When you stop contacting her, you're not just going silent, you're shining a light on the truth. Because in the absence of words, affection, effort, or pursuit, what's left standing is the reality of how she truly feels. You see, people can fake interest. They can pretend to care when it's convenient. They can enjoy the attention, the messages, the validation, without ever investing anything meaningful in return. But when you remove yourself from the equation, the emotional mask begins to slip. The energy you once gave so freely is no longer there to prop up the illusion. Now it's just her and the void you left behind. And it's in that void that the truth reveals itself. If she never truly cared, your silence won't matter to her. She'll move on quickly, maybe even with relief. She won't check her phone. She won't ask where you went. She won't feel the weight of your absence. Because in truth, she never valued your presence to begin with. As painful as that is, it's also freeing. Because that kind of truth saves you time, energy, and heartaches. It shows you that you were watering a plant that was never going to grow. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you can walk away with your dignity intact. But if she did care, if your presence meant more than she let on, then your silence becomes a mirror, one she's forced to look into whether she wants to or not. Every quiet moment becomes a reflection of what she may have missed, overlooked, or taken for granted. She begins to question not only where you went, but why she didn't fight harder to keep you close. That's when regret shows up. That's when realization kicks in. That's when she begins to replay your conversations, your gestures, your patience, and your presence, and starts to see them for what they really were: valuable, rare, and sincere. What's powerful about all of this is that the truth doesn't come from confrontation. You didn't have to argue, beg, explain, or convince her. You just stepped back, and in doing so, you created a silent test that only genuine emotions can pass. That's when the noise dies down and the reality becomes crystal clear. She either shows up because she truly feels something, or she disappears, revealing she never did. And in that truth, you gain something far more valuable than her attention. You gain clarity. You finally get to see what was real and what was imagined. And whether she comes back or not, whether she reaches out or stays quiet, you walk away with the greatest gift silence can offer: the truth about her, the truth about you, and the truth about where you really stood in her life. So, what happens when you stop contacting her? You shift the energy, you break the pattern, you give silence a voice, and let me tell you, that voice speaks volumes. She'll go through emotions she didn't expect: confusion, curiosity, maybe even regret. She'll begin to question your absence, analyze your worth, and confront her own feelings without the cushion of your constant presence. And while she's doing that, something even more powerful happens. You start rediscovering your value. You realize that your attention is a privilege, not a guarantee. That being available 24/7 doesn't make you more lovable. It makes you more forgettable. So let her feel your silence. Let her sit with your absence. Because if what you had was real, she'll find her way back, not just with words, but with action. And if it wasn't, then, my friend, your silence saved you from years of emotional noise. Remember this: the right person will never need to be chased. The right person will notice your silence, feel your value, and move toward you, not away from you. And that's not just a lesson in love, that's a lesson in self-respect. Now go on and live your worth. Don't beg for attention. Command it by knowing when to speak and when to let your silence do the talking.